Hello again everyone and welcome back to Skyblock News. I'm your host Derailious, and today we're going to be going over Skyblock Update 0.20.9, which includes a bunch of Crimson Isle quality of life features. I've got to say, this update is so good that if you're looking for a reason to come back to the game, I think this is it. Without any further ado though, let's launch right into this. Starting off today, the admins begin by stating, "Hello folks, welcome to Skyblock 0.20.9. Today we're kickstarting the holiday season with a small update to the Crimson Isle. Read on to find out what's in store." Honestly, I think calling this a small update is a massive understatement. In terms of Kuudra armor, they've made some general changes here. All Kuudra armor now has a combat requirement and Kuudra tier completion requirement as follows. So for basic, hot, burning, fiery, and infernal, there are now requirements, and they go up by 5 combat levels starting at combat level 22 per tier, and they also require the Kuudra clear completion at the same level. So if you want to use like burning gear, for example, you need to have done burning Kuudra before. This is totally reasonable. I can't imagine anyone will have a problem with this, so let's move on. In terms of Crimson armor, while Crimson armor's swipe ability still remains, many facets of said ability have been changed. You no longer gain stacks on kills, you gain stacks on melee hits. Magic damage no longer interacts with gaining Dominus stacks, nor does it proc the swipe ability. The stack gain cooldown scales based on the amount of Crimson armor pieces you're wearing as follows. So for 2 pieces, it's 1.5 seconds, for 3, it's 1, and for 4, it's half a second. Depending on your lowest tier of Crimson armor, you gain stats based on how many stacks you have active. So at basic tier, it's 0.05 swing range per stack, at hot tier, it's 0.1, at burning, it's 0.1 plus 1 ferocity per tier, at fiery, it's 0.1 plus 2 ferocity per tier, and at infernal, it's 0.1 swing range, 2 ferocity, and 10 additive damage per tier. Before we continue, I just want to say, if you are interested, please make sure to like and subscribe down below, as it really does mean a ton, and use code RAIL in the Hypixel store for 5% off your order, as it does help out the channel a lot. Also, feel free to join my Discord down below at discord.gg/Derailious. We are hosting a 100ml giveaway right now, and we're likely to host more in the near future, so feel free to join, as it's the best place to keep up with Skyblock news. Without any further ado though, let's get back to the video. Generally, these are all major improvements to the way that the Crimson armor is working, and I think it actually makes things a lot better in the game for the long term. They've also overhauled the way the swipe ability works. In most cases, the swipe damage is 15 to 25% of your melee hit. It deals double damage the first time it swipes a mob, and it can trigger multiple times on the same mob. It also can no longer duplicate combat XP on kill, so you can't kill dupe anymore. The swipe damage is dependent on both the number of Crimson armor pieces and the lowest tier of Crimson armor that you're wearing. This damage increase is reflected as a multiplier as follows. So if you're using all 4 pieces of Crimson, and you want to use Infernal, that will give you a 3x multiplier. If you're using 3/4 Crimson, that means you're going to have a 2x multiplier at Infernal, and for Fiery you're going to have a 1.75x multiplier. Keep in mind that this is balanced around having only 3 out of 4 pieces on, because let's be honest, a lot of people use things like a Warden helmet. These changes allow Crimson armor to provide more consistent damage output when fighting any mob, and gives players an incentive to upgrade their Crimson armor for increased damage scaling. The reduced damage scaling also helps with future-proofing the armor as we make combat content in the future. I really like all of these changes. For people who are initially worried about things like Enderman, you can still phase skip. It's not that hard. At base Fiery, it is actually fairly easy if you get the timings right. I don't have perfect gear sets at all, but I'm still able to do it relatively consistently, and I imagine that will increase as I keep focusing on this boss. I think that this is in a great setup at the moment, it's in a great state for the average player, and if you're interested in getting combat armor, this is a great set for you to have. They've also made some changes to things like Blaze Slayer and Enderman Slayer to retain some of Crimson armor's current use cases. They've adjusted the health and combat XP for Blaze Slayer mobs, nerfing their HP by a lot and increasing their combat XP by a lot. So this is for the Smoldering Blaze and the Millennia Blaze. Their health was slashed, and they've gotten more combat XP associated with them. The Slayer mini-bosses for the Infernal Demon Lord have been nerfed as well. Tier 3, it's gone from 12 million to 9 million, and from Tier 4, it's gone from 25 million to 17.5 million, and from 75 million down to 50. They've also reduced the damage of the mini-bosses by around 25%, so keep that in mind. They've also lowered the kill requirements for the Tier 3 and Tier 4 Infernal Demon Lord by 25%. These numbers have been adjusted post-alpha, taking into account the 45 combat wisdom available from Slayer weapons, which, by the way, there's 45 combat wisdom from the highest tier of Slayer weapons. For Enderman, they've increased the base damage of Enderman katanas by 25%. They've also increased the crit damage of Enderman katanas by 5 to 20%. They've slightly increased the delay of the Void Gloom Seraph going into its hiss phase, and they've slightly reduced the duration of the beams phase, which is pretty nice. To compensate for the removal of kill duping and give players an incentive to use a melee set, they've implemented the following changes. Slayer weapons now have conditional combat wisdom for their respective mobs, ranging from 15 to 45 combat wisdom. The maximum amount of progress that a kill can contribute towards your Slayer quest has been raised from 50 to 75%. The combat XP from certain Slayer bosses, mini-bosses, and related mobs have been slightly adjusted to prevent Slayer trading from being overpowered. And lastly, they've done the following fixes. Burning Vengeance now has a damage cap of 50 million. The Endstone Sword's Extreme Focus ability now has a damage boost cap of 500%, and a revamped ability description. For Terror Armor, they've made similar changes here. The stack gain cooldown is now consistent regardless of how many Terror Armor pieces that you're wearing, and the damage boost per Hydra stack is dependent on both the number of pieces that you're wearing and the lowest tier of Terror Armor that you're wearing, as follows. So if you're using 4 out of 4 Terror, and you're using it at Infernal tier, you're going to get a 15 times multiplier, which is very strong. Depending on your lowest tier of armor, you also gain arrow speed and side arrow damage, depending on how many stacks you have active. So at Infernal, for example, it's plus 3% arrow speed and 60% side arrow damage, but at Basic, it'd only be 1% and 20 side arrow damage. There's also some other changes related to Kuudra. They've decreased the amount of hits required for Kuudra's hits phase by about 20%, and they've decreased the amount of damage required to kill Kuudra's final phase by 25%. Aurora armor was already in a pretty good state, but they've decided to buff it even more with a brand new ability in the form of homing missiles, providing you with a slight damage bonus here. The stack gain cooldown scales based on the amount of Aurora pieces you're wearing as follows, so at 2 pieces it's 1 second per stack, and at 4 it's 0.5. If you're using 3 pieces, it's 0.7. At 10 stacks, you can sneak to activate the homing missile ability, firing 3 to 5 missiles to targets near you. The number of missiles fired depends on the tier of the Aurora armor. So at Basic, you only get 3, at Hot and Burning, you get 4, and at Fiery and Infernal, you get 5. The base damage from the missiles is 5,000, they are considered magic damage, and they have a scaling of 0.3. The missiles can only hit a singular target though, and it does not deal splash damage. This set ability provides a decent DPS boost to players not using Wither Impact. For those who are, the damage increase is much less significant. This is intended design-wise, as Wither Impact does not need help at the current time, which makes a lot of sense. The Aurora helmet, by the way, also has ability damage that scales throughout the armor tier, making it an expensive yet better option than Wither Goggles. I really like these changes. Fervor armor now has a new ability in the form of Ground Pound, allowing tank builds to deal damage while building for tankiness. So basically, the stack gain cooldown scales based on the amount of Fervor armor pieces that you're wearing. So at 2 pieces, it's 1.5 seconds per stack, at 3 it's 1, and at 4 it's 0.5. At 10 stacks, you can sneak to activate the Ground Pound ability, allowing you to leap into the air and quickly slam back down to deal damage to nearby enemies. This damage scales based on your EHP, and it doesn't scale based on your armor tier because you naturally have higher stats at higher armor tiers, thus you deal more damage. In addition to Ground Pound, Fervor has a bonus passive that has a 50% chance to redirect aggro of 3 nearby mobs to the player on melee hit. Really strong passive, players are going to love it. Hollow Armor has been reworked to effectively be a support build. Hollow Armor gains spirit stacks both from you hitting a mob and up to 4 nearby players hitting a mob in a 25 block radius. The stack gain cooldown is individual to each nearby player. If you and 4 people hit a mob within a second, you should gain 5 stacks. The stack gain cooldown scales based on the amount of Fervor armor pieces that you're wearing as follows. So for 2 pieces it's 3 seconds, for 3 it's 2, and for 4 it's 1 second per stack. There's also a bunch of ability changes. For 10 Spirit, you can use Spirit Spark. You can heal yourself and all nearby players for 8% of your maximum HP. At 15 Spirit, there's Hollowed Rush. Grant all nearby players 1.3x mana regeneration for 6 seconds. And Raging Wind is at 20 Spirit. You can grant all nearby players 30% damage and 10 ferocity for 20 seconds. This stacks up to 3 times. Ichor Pool is the last one at 30 spirit. You can spawn a pool with 10 block radius. Any player standing within this pool gains 1.2x damage and 40 ferocity. The pool lasts for 20 seconds. The abilities do not stack unless stated in the description, even if activated by different players. The ability casting patterns have been simplified to 2 inputs, and the hidden ability of the Hollow Wand has been removed as it didn't fit in with the set's support theme. I really like Hollow Armor. This is going to be a sleeper pick for some people. I think Ichor Pool has a lot of use cases potentially. We'll have to see how that goes though. Next up, we have a ton of trophy fishing changes. To allow for easier tracking of all the boosts towards catching trophy fish chance is now a stat. To compensate for it now being additive and thus losing out on 16 to 20% trophy fish chance, the following things received a buff to their trophy fish chance. So their trophy hunter armor set bonus has been buffed from 0 to 5% on bronze, 5 to 10% on silver, 10 to 20% on gold, and diamond got a 10% buff as well, going all the way up to 30%. The trophy fish chance on the magma rod, inferno rod, and hellfire rod were buffed as well by 5% each. There's also the bonus trophy fish chance on Odger's Teeth as follows. Bronze got 1%, silver got 2, gold got 3, and diamond got 4. In terms of the trophy fish themselves, there has been a lot of rate adjustments. Pity now triggers at 600 catches for all fish, and the catch rate of the following fish have been adjusted directly. So Vanille went from 3 to 8%, Karate Fish from 1 to 2%, Slugfish from 10 to 15%, and Blobfish from 15 to 25%. They've also buffed the Golden Fish by making its appearance rate lower. Instead of it being every 15 to 20 minutes, it's now every 8 to 12 minutes, which means that you will get them way more often. I really like these changes, and basically what they want to do is reduce the variance in trophy fishing and make it so it's less than 100 hours total for most players. There is now also an instance-wide announcement when a player catches a diamond trophy fish for the first time, and you can check the amount of each tier of trophy fish you've caught at Odger's menu. Instead of needing to salvage your Trophy Hunter armor set for the Magma Fish reward, you will now be granted 20 Diamond Magma Fish upon completing Diamond Trophy Hunter. This is also retroactively claimable for anyone who has achieved Diamond Trophy Hunter. The upgrade cost of the Trophy Hunter armor has been standardized, by the way, so it's easier to set up for most people. Next up, they did make a lot of changes to the loot pool for Crimson Isle and non-Crimson Isle lava fishing. So inside the Crimson Isle, you're going to get items that are exclusive to the Crimson Isle, lava shells, Kuudra keys, things like that. And the non-Crimson Isle loot pool is much less interesting. Obviously, they want you to go to the Crimson Isle to do most of your lava fishing. It's basically based off of the previous lava fishing loot pool, and there are some other things you can get here, notably a lot of Kuudra keys. You can get a lot of nether stars, heavy pearls, things like that. And you can also get things like flames and lava shells, which is pretty nice. I think this is good, by the way. I like these changes a lot. They've also done some minor other fishing changes. Diamond Magma Fish now cost 20 gold Magma Fish to craft. They've added 2 fishing speed to Finwave, Ecliptic, and Gill Splash equipment. And those equipment pieces can now be upgraded and starred. And they've also added 15 fishing speed to Hot Bait. Next up, we have the Unsoulbinding update, which... yeah, literally everything on the Crimson Isle is now unsoulbound, or pretty much everything. And they've also stated that the items that are donated in the museum, they are currently soulbound still, but they will be looking into ways to let you unsoulbind these items as soon as humanly possible, which I'm really excited about. I think these items all should have been unsoulbound from the beginning. It's great that they've done so now. This is excellent for pretty much every mid and early game player. You will be able to access these items way easier. You'll be able to upgrade your armor sets. You'll be able to get involved in mid and late game content. They're getting rid of a lot of the gatekeeping here. Lastly, we have a bunch of other changes. They've done a bit of a bestiary kill pass here, so the amount of required kills for a lot of these mobs has been lowered. Barbarian Duke 10, Mage Outlaw, Blade Soul, Ashfang, Magma Boss. Lord Jawbus now only requires 100 kills to max out, and the Pyroclastic Worm got nerfed from 4,000 kills to 1,000, thank God. You now gain Skyblock XP for attaining a certain reputation rank in each faction. If you max out both of them, you get 150 total Skyblock XP, that's 75 per faction. I really like this change, it's just solid. They've increased the number of times you can use Matriarch's Perfume per day from 2 to 4. The faction quests are now automatically started instead of having to manually select them. Completing a higher tier of Kuudra will now complete quests looking for a lower tier completion. The Kuudra Specialist perk got buffed from 5 to 20%, which is great. You can re-roll Kuudra chests once per run with Kismet Feathers, and they've added upgraded versions of Thunder Bottles that can store a much larger amount of Thunder charges. They've also changed the piece bonuses of Magma Necklace and the Glowstone Gauntlet to crit damage and intelligence respectively. Both pieces, by the way, previously gave health. They've made some other changes here that are pretty solid. The Endstone Sword change is here listed twice. You can now stack the duration of smoldering polarization effects. There's chat messages when Slayer mini-bosses spawn, which is really cool, and you no longer lose reputation from the other faction while completing faction quests, which, once again, great change. I really love this stuff. This is just all excellent stuff here. There's a bunch of bug fixes that they've done as well, so if you're interested, feel free to check these out. And they have a What's Next section. The TLDR on the What's Next section is that they want to rework Habanero tactics, they want a way to optionally negate your trophy fish chance, they want Crimson Swipe to not be magic damage. That's going to be complicated to implement with their current damage system, but they're going to try. They're going to rework Rend because it is not balanced and it sucks and it's just kind of terrible to deal with. And they want players to get the newly unsoulbound items back to let them sell them if they, want to. So that's the short-term changes. In terms of long-term stuff, they want lower tiers of Kuudra to be more accessible to players, which I think that's great. They want to make improvements to reputation, once again great. And they want to revamp the mechanics of the Crimson Isle mini-bosses. They thank everybody for all the assistance on the alpha, and that's about it. Overall, if you want my opinion, like I said at the beginning, this is one of the best updates that we've seen in a very long time. If you're someone who has played Skyblock, if you got burnt out, if you don't want to play it anymore, I recommend hopping on and checking this out at least for a little while. There are a ton of things that have been opened up to most players now, and I really do like the new system that they're utilizing. The feedback that they got on the alpha was great, and they stayed as much in their forum post, so make sure you keep leaving feedback because they are taking it into account. This is an absolute banger from the Skyblock team. I really appreciate this update, and yeah, that's really all I have to say on that. At the end of the day, though, my name's Derailious. Thank you so much for watching this video till the end, and look to the future, fellas. I'll see you then.